Hello, Ted here with Whole Latte Love, and I have a couple of the Gaggia Anima models that are offered. One being the Prestige and the other one being the regular, and the only reason I have these two and not the last one is I'm showing you the difference on how to remove the casing on this machine. And the only difference between the two is the hot water function. One's got the wand, one's got the spout. So if you have one of these models, I'm going to show you how to remove the front and the top of the machine in case you have to get in there and figure out something or repair something.
Okay.
Okay. So we're going to start with this one. And like I said, the only difference between them is the...
We'll show that process, how to get that.
Once I get to that process where I need to remove this front cover, I'll jump over here and show you how to remove that. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to start with removing these trim pieces right here.
You need only one tool for this, right?
Yeah, we only need one tool to remove the front and the top of the machine.
Okay.
Which is a T10
it's a Torx.
Screwdriver, Torx, star-shaped. You can use a long one like this, short. If you have a screwdriver with bits that you can put in it, you can use that also.
Okay.
I would recommend using one with a magnetic tip on it, which will make your life a little bit easier depending on what you're doing with the machine.
Okay.
So that is basically all you're going to need to do what we're going to show you right here. This one, we're going to pull that off and just get it out of the way. Mm-hmm. Then we got to remove the trim pieces here. Now the trim pieces, I use my tools at my bench.
Fingernails?
My fingernails, unfortunately, are a little long, but I use them, which is why I don't really trim them that often. They come in real handy when I'm working on stuff. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to pry between these two panels, or this trim and that panel right there. So I'm going to pry and pop it out a little bit like that. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to slide up, and then I'm going to use my thumb here and kind of push it out and pull this at the same time.
Now, if I didn't have the long nails, what can I use? Just
you can use like a real tiny flat blade screwdriver, something, maybe even a credit card. I don't know. It's something that you can wedge in there and just kind of get it popped out a little bit. So you just pop that out and slide it out. Same thing with this side. We're going to wedge behind here and just, you can see how easy it is to just get behind here and kind of tweak it a little bit.
And then work your way up just
a little. And then work up, and then you can actually start pulling it, but I usually use my thumb to kind of help guide it out if it's a little stubborn.
Okay.
And then just pop it off. So now we got that out of the way. We got these two T10 screws. They're black T10 screws. Most of them will be black. We'll have some other oddball T10 screws, but most of them will be the black screws. So all the black screws are going to be the same size and everything, so you can put those all in one pile if you want.
Don't have to crack the screws hard. Yeah.
So we're going to take these two out. And there we go. Let's set those off to the side. Now this is where we're going to remove this cover for the screen area here. What you're going to do is I face the machine forward and I put my thumbs down here, and if you can't quite do it the same way I'm doing, you'll figure out a way, but I'm basically showing you how to pop this off. So I got my fingers up here and I'm pushing down and I'm pulling up, and you can see that pop forward like that.
Yep.
If it doesn't pop forward, you just pull on it like that with your fingers if you can get a hold of there.
Okay.
But once it pops forward, you can just carefully maneuver this off. There's going to be a rubber piece here that it sits in there. Sometimes it wants to come out of there as you're moving this off. You also have the button cover. Sometimes it'll stay in here, get dropped in there or something like that, or it'll stay on there like it did this time. Either way,
take that off.
Take it off or fish it out and kind of set it off to the side.
Okay.
And then this, make sure this is all seated in there correctly. This basically just helps hold the clear part and that plastic frame in there.
Okay.
So if any of that moves,
just to leave that right in there.
Yeah. I always just leave it like that.
Okay.
So we're going to set that off. Also, try not to put your fingers on the inside.
Yeah, you don't want to leave prints in there. Yeah.
They're easier to wipe out on the outside.
Sure.
So after that, you got the one screw that sits way back here in the middle. Okay, and you're going to use your T10. It's also a black T10 screw. So we're going to get on there and we're going to unthread it.
Here's where that magnetic tip might help you out a little bit.
Yeah, hopefully my tip's strong enough to do so right now. Yep, there we go. Sometimes I have to like remagnetize it, but now with that out, we're going to push this spout down. And now we're going to maneuver this off. There's 4 arms that go into slot holes back here. So we're going to lift up like that and then pull forward at the same time, and then it's going to drop down. Literally, I'm working it around this thing here.
Right. Okay.
And now I can just pull these two apart.
Okay.
We're going to set those off to the side. Now we got 2 more screws These are also T10, but they're not the black screws. They're stainless steel, and they're the only two that are long T10 screws. Longer than the other ones. So we'll just make sure that we keep track of those. You can see that they're slightly longer.
Yep.
Get that one out. There we go.
Nice.
We're going to set those outside and keep track of those. Try not to lose them. And now at this point is where you can pull that front cover off, but I'm going to show you on this.
What we need to do if you have this one.
Yep. So this one's got a slightly different method. Everything's the same as I showed you on this one, but we need to move that arm out of the way.
Okay.
So you move the arm to the side, pull your Panarella wand off if it's on there, because you need to slide this cap off of it.
Okay.
And if you look underneath here, there's like a groove up underneath here.
Yep.
Flat blade screwdriver goes right up in there, and you just push up and tweak it a little bit.
Okay.
It's a little locking tab. Once you get that undone, you kind of wiggle this through and get it out of there. Must have moved it. There we go. I must have moved it a little too much. This big tab goes up underneath here.
Right.
So I had it off one way or the other, so I couldn't get it out. So we're going to slide that right off.
Okay.
When we put it back on, that has to be facing upwards, and I'll show that in a little bit. So now that we have the cover off, we can go after the one T10 screw that's back there that's holding the wand into that sleeve.
Okay.
So we're going after that screw. We're going to back that out. This is, you want to be careful with this.
Don't want to drop it down in there, right?
Because if your tip isn't magnetic enough like mine is right now, we can grab a pair of needle nose pliers and just carefully go around it and grab and pull it out.
Okay.
If you don't get it, it's going to drop down inside the machine.
So there's a little area you can
Yeah,
get
there's
through
a gap
there.
right here.
Okay.
Now you might get lucky and it'll land in the area once we get the cover off where you can fish it out. Otherwise you're going to have to figure out a different method of getting it out of there if it fell down any further.
Okay.
So we're going to set that off to the side. So after that you can just wiggle and pull the arm out. And you can see that there's one O-ring here. There's supposed to be two. If you look inside, oh, it must have fallen down in here. I was going to say there's usually two. It's supposed to be there or there. It seems to have fallen down in there. If that's the case, you're already going to be removing that anyway. You should be able to find that relatively easy. It's not going to fall straight down because it's much bigger than the screw. If it did fall any further, you'll have to fish it out. But you want to make sure both of the O-rings are on here, and then we're going to set that off to the side.
Okay.
At that point, you did everything on here like that on this machine, and you remove the arm. Now you can pull this front cover off.
Okay. So everything else is the same.
Everything else is the same. That's just the only difference.
Okay.
So you're going to pull out on the sides here a little bit, on both sides, and you're going to pull forward at the same time.
Okay.
And it's just going to slide right off.
Easy enough.
It's got little tabs here that lock into the housing, which is why I pulled out a little bit and pulled forward.
Okay.
Because all the other stuff is out of the way, and now this slides right off. So we're going to set that off to the side. Now with that out of the way, I'm going to grab this ribbon cable underneath, and if you look underneath here, this little flap, it's a connector there.
Yep.
So I'm going to put my thumb on the connector and my finger underneath the ribbon cable, and I'm going to wiggle and pull it out while holding my thumb on the top of that.
There's a reason you put your thumb on there, right?
Yeah, there's this flat orange piece right across here.
Yep.
It clips onto the connector, so there's little connector clips here on either side. If you happen to pull on the cable without holding this like that a little bit, you have a chance of breaking these clips on either side, and that little plastic thing will come off, and you might have the ribbons now move and come off the pin connectors that they're connected to, which will cause problems if you can't get it seated back on there properly, because you more than likely won't be able to get that orange piece to go back on correctly with the clips being broken.
So definitely keep a thumb over there.
Yeah.
When
So you want to support it a little bit as you're pulling it out, because you don't want to pull it off.
Okay.
So with that, I shove it down in here and get it out of the way,
Just out of the way.
because we're going to pull this off.
Okay.
With that, now we can just grab this. I got my thumb here. It doesn't matter exactly where you put it, and I got my fingers down through these like black slots in the back here.
Right there. Okay.
So I'm just going to grab it like this, and I'm just going to pull it towards me.
And There she goes.
And then these two pieces separate.
Okay.
And I'll show you how to put these back in later on.
Okay.
Don't worry if it came separate like that, it's supposed to.
Okay.
So we're going to set those to the side. Also, if you're handling this, you can see there's a bunch of fingerprints on here. That's from me playing around with it already a bunch of times. Wipe it down and we'll show you when you can wipe that down eventually.
Okay.
So now that that's out of the way, now we can remove the top, and now we have to remove some screws to remove the top.
Okay.
So we're going to go ahead and do that. Now with your water tank out and empty, this one's still in there, but it's empty. So we're going to move off to the side. We got 3 screws in here to take out. We got one right down here. These are stainless steel T10 screws. They're the same size as the black screws.
Okay.
So that's the only difference between them, stainless steel or black.
But this is like a water area, so we want the stainless screws in here.
Yep, so when we reinstall everything, we want to make sure we use the stainless steels in this area, as well in the bean hopper area, which there's a couple of them in there also, which we're going to get to here in a second. So I got that one out, and this one. And fish these out once you get them unscrewed, and set those off to the side. We're going to turn this so I can show you the other 2. There's 2 here on the one side, one at the back corner. I'm going to get in your way.
Yep, you do what you got to do.
And I'm just going to screw it. And these 2, I will point out that you want to carefully remove them because they will slide and fall down into your grinder.
You don't want that.
If they do go down there, make sure to fish them out.
Yep.
You don't want to start up your machine with screws in the grinder.
Be grinding screws because they're not going to grind very well.
No. They'll probably
and it makes a terrible espresso.
break your burrs. It could break the lower burr plate.
And you're going to demonstrate how to fish it out now, right?
Yeah, hopefully I can get it with my needle. Usually I have a smaller pair with me, especially if it goes down all the way. And this is going to be a pain in my butt. Yeah, it keeps falling down. Oh. Of course, it's on the back side, which is harder to get the tool to work around. I got a hold of it. Oh, you little. Yeah.
Does it help if you yell things when something?
Sometimes, I mean, I'm not a very loud yeller at stuff when this kind of happens, but some people are. It might be a little bit of a problem. And eventually you will get it out. And this is basically showing you, okay, so I got it.
There it is.
Whew. Wasn't sure how long it was going to take me, because usually I don't use these ones. I use a lot finer point needle nose pliers to do that, to get down in there.
Okay.
So that'll show you why you need to pull the screw out as soon as you get it out of there, because it'll drop down in there and it'll cause you a little bit more frustration, basically.
Real world demonstration.
Yep. So with those out, the only other thing that I have to do is undo this screw here, which is also a T10, but it's a very short, fine threaded T10 screw. And this is literally holding the holder for the sensor for the bean hopper door. So this magnet here goes into this area here, and there's a sensor in here that reads that
magnet. Yeah.
So this is just an individual holder, and you can see that this is a shorter, small screw.
Yep.
So we're going to set that off to the side. It's the only one like it. And now we can pull the sensor holder out, and this is where your sensor is, where the magnet reads it.
Okay.
And I'm just going to slide it out like that.
Okay.
You can pull it out this way, but it's not. I don't recommend it because you can pop those clips.
Break those clips. Yeah.
It's just easier to slide it in and out from here.
Okay.
So we're going to set that next to the screw that we just got with it. We're going to push that sensor down in there. Don't worry, we'll fish it out later.
Okay.
Now that that's done, we can pull the top up. But we have to be careful because there's a wire attached to a sensor over here. We have a water line attached to the tank holder area.
Okay.
And then we have that sensor that we just put down through the hole. We just need to make sure it's not snagging on anything as we're pulling this up.
All right.
So we're going to carefully slide this up and lean it this way and making sure our sensor doesn't get snagged on it.
That's fine.
And you can see that the water line that goes to the tank, you just pull that off. And then over here, I'm going to turn this like that, and we have a sensor underneath this, and this you're just going to lift up on the bottom here and then slide it back to get it off.
Okay.
Set that off to the side. And now we have this wire to fish out from these like little hooks that are holding it in there.
Okay.
So we're going to fish it around that hook, and fish it around that hook, and then around that hook. And now we can grab both or all the wires here and pull it out of the connector.
Okay.
You see I was kind of close there, it gives it a little bit more.
Yeah.
So now we have the top off, and we can set that off somewhere where it's safe, and you can continue going into the machine on to whatever you need to look into. All right, so we have the machine open, and one of the things I'm going to explain and show you how to do is to clean this internal chamber spout thing that this is usually over, and this is what supplies your coffee into your drink. Sometimes you may run into an issue where it's coming out one side and not the other, and that's usually a good indication that you're getting a buildup inside of here. Another indication would be that you hit the button, it does the grinding, and all of a sudden the water starts moving through the brew unit, but all of a sudden it takes a little bit longer for it to come out. It's just like it's a delayed reaction. And that's because you might have both of these openings plugged up on the inside, and it's filling the chamber and eventually coming out around it, and then coming down out your spout after that. So that's what that delay will be.
All right, I guess we're going to see inside of this, right? But that can hold a fair amount of
This
coffee.
holds a lot of liquid in here, especially if this get plugged up.
Sure.
And this will also, it could also affect your taste and your temperature of your espresso, because if this is plugged up, now this chamber is filled up with old coffee, and then your next shot is going to take longer, and it's also going to taste, colder and a little bit not correct, probably.
And in a minute, we'll mention a way to maybe stop this from happening in the first place.
Yeah, so if you have a delayed reaction, slow drip, something of that sort, you're probably going to have a buildup in here.
Okay.
Another quick way that I can mention real quick is we're going to do this anyway, but we're going to pull the tray out so we can pull the brew group out.
Okay.
All right. So if you pull the brew group out like that, and you just move it out of the way, that inlet right here that the brew group goes up into,
That one way back up in there?
that little long neck up in there, is the other end of this chamber.
Okay.
So if there's a buildup in here and you have a full chamber of liquid, you pull that brew group out, you're probably going to have a bunch of liquid come out of there.
Okay.
So if there's a bunch of liquid that comes out of there, you're full.
Okay.
And it's not supposed to.
And it's not supposed to be.
So
Okay.
I'm going to show you how to get this out of here,
All right.
clean it up, and then what you can do to prevent this from happening.
All right.
So remove the brew unit for one, which we
Okay.
just did. Now I need to remove 2 screws. And the reason why we needed to remove the brew unit is because we need that inlet free, because
Okay.
we're going to be pulling that out with this chamber.
All right.
So we got 2 screws. We got one right down here underneath the spout in the middle. It's a T10 screw.
Okay.
And get it out the rest of the way.
Okay.
And then we got one more. This one's a little trickier. It's not hard, but it's just slightly trickier. It's this guy right here. And as you can see, I can't go straight at it because there's a
something
housing
in
in
the
my way.
Okay.
So I just go down at the lowest point I can get here and kind of go on an angle with it. It's not like overly torqued.
Okay.
So as long as you
should
get it
be-
on there, you can get it started, and you can see I'm actually backing it out just fine. Especially if you have a newer T10 screw driver. Mine's a little old. I've had it for quite a while. You can see it's a little
beat up.
rounded out, so I'm still able to get it out. And then you can go in before it's out completely, go in and grab
Get
it
with
and
your
pull it
fingers.
out
Okay.
and set that outside. That's also a black T10 screw.
Okay.
So now with that out of the way, we can grab this chamber. I'm going to lift up and then tweak and pull this out through the opening that's behind here.
Okay.
So we're going to pull and then maneuver it out.
Okay.
Just like that.
Not too bad.
Blah, 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 blah.
Okay. I like the sound effects, Ted.
So now we can just move the machine off to the side. We don't have to worry about anything else right now. We're worried and focused on this. This is that chamber I'm talking about. All your coffee comes out of here, but if it's plugged up, this fills up and then stays in there for the most part. Unless you pull the brew unit out and it squirts out at you.
Okay.
So we're going to open this up, and this is the cover that has these 4 tabs, 2 on either side, here and here, and here and here.
Okay.
And the trick to getting those out is if you have a really tiny flat blade screwdriver, you can go up underneath the tab, like that. And I usually just tweak it a little bit until it gets up over the tab. And I'm pulling on it a little bit just to get it to stay above the tab.
Okay.
And once you go and do another one just like that, this machine's relatively new, so the seal is pretty good still. But if you had your machine for a while, usually it just pops up over there really easily. And I'm going to leave those two like that. Come around. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to tweak up, and now you can see that it's starting to separate right here.
Yep.
Like that.
Okay.
And then you're just going to lift that right off.
Okay.
Now there is this gray seal right here that sometimes stays here or here. It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter where it is. Okay.
I like to put it back on this when I put this on here so it's not distorting this in case it gets hung up somehow.
Okay.
So I'll make sure to get that out of there. Pull that off. And after I'm done cleaning this, I'll just lay it back into position on this thing here.
Okay.
And then put the cover back on. So that's how you open up the spout, and you can see how big of a chamber this is.
Yeah.
So what happens is, depending on the coffee beans that you're using, an oily layer will build up in here. And over time, that oily layer will break apart and plug up those two holes that the coffee is supposed to go through.
Okay.
Once that happens, it's very hard to get that cleared out. You can use the paper clip trick or whatever, or brush up through the openings and see if you can get it to break apart, and hopefully it was just a little bit.
Might get you some temporary relief, or if you're lucky.
If you're lucky, you might just get away with doing it that one time. If it continues to do that, you've got a buildup in here. And you're going to want to clean it out.
Okay.
So clean it out as best you can. Once you get to this point, you can wash it under water, hot water, scrubby brush of some sort or whatever, anything that you can get fit down in there, and you can clean that up. And you'll see what I'm talking about if you have that problem. It'll look like a slimy coffee sludgy layer that's all over in there, and you just want to clean it right out.
Okay.
Now you got it cleaned out. We're going to put the seal back on. Just kind of set it back into place. And we're going to do that. Just kind of put it there. And take this, it only goes on one way. We're going to just kind of slide it into position. And now just push down.
Nice.
You want to make sure all the tabs go around and they are all locked into place.
Okay.
Now that we have that back on, this is all cleaned out, we can put it back into place.
Now, should we talk real quick just about how you might be able to prevent this in the first place?
So what'll happen is, depending on the beans that you're using, if you're using like an oily type bean, which is not recommended for these machines because it can cause problems with your grinder and your spout.
Sure.
So you want to use the coffee clean tablets. You put them in your grinder or your brew group or whatever it is.
Yeah, your bypass doser there for pre-ground. Yeah.
So what this does is it'll help break down the oils or anything that's building up inside your spouts and all the other stuff, and it'll help clean that out before it gets too bad.
Okay.
Another thing you can do is do a rinse a lot more frequently with the machine, like just run a blank shot. Try to rinse it out as much as you can every now and then. But if it gets to the point where it gets built up like that, you're already too late.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
So yeah, a little preventative thing. You want to just kind of use some maintenance on it every now and then, depending on what you're using for beans.
Okay.
So now we can put this back in.
Okay.
We're going to position this nipple inlet thing here back into that opening where the brew group locks into, which is that guy right there.
Yep.
It's like an opening right there. So we're going to slide and maneuver this into there, and you're just going to position it like this and get to go kind of back in spot. And then you're just going to wiggle it around a little bit and get everything kind of in place. Now there is one thing you're going to have to do here at the front of the machine.
Okay.
So I got that kind of pushed in there where it's supposed to.
Okay.
But what you're going to want to do is down here, there's these plastic like tabs here and here. They're sitting on that plastic right now.
Okay.
They're supposed to be behind it. So as you're holding this in position, kind of pushing down, I'm pushing on that tab, and you'll see it pop down.
Yep.
And do the same thing on the other side. Now it's dropped down in.
Now it's in the right place.
If you didn't do that, you put that screw in. You can still put that screw in first if you want to.
Yeah.
But that screw would not line up.
Would not go in. Okay.
So just make sure that's dropped down in there. And now this thing is in position. We can put our 2 screws back in. I'm going to start with this one here.
Okay.
Which is that guy in the middle there. Once you get it in there, just thread it in until it stops. Do not continue turning after that. And then this one is a little bit trickier. I tend to use my fingers first.
To get it started in that.
To get it kind of in the hole and kind of turn it just so it's started. Because you don't want to drop it down in there.
Yeah.
If you do happen to drop it down, your machine is completely open. You want to hold your grinder. This thing might pop out on you, but don't worry about it. And you can tip your machine upside down without all of your accessories on it and wiggle it and get that screw to fall out.
Okay. Hopefully that doesn't happen.
Hopefully, but your best bet is to do what I just showed you,
sure.
and you shouldn't have that problem. Same thing with removing it. Don't unscrew it all the way. Grab it and then finish unscrewing and pull it out.
Okay.
So now that it's started, I can use my screwdriver, my T10, and get it threaded in there the rest of the way. And then once it hits that stop point,
You're done?
I'm done.
Okay.
So we got that screwed in, we got that screwed in, we've taken the chamber apart, we've cleaned it out, and now you're going to have to reassemble the machine, and that should resolve your flow problem that was coming out of here because of that buildup that was in there. All right, so we've done the work we needed to do. We have the internal structure put back in the machine. Now I'm going to show you how to, after I scratch my shoulder real quick, how to put the extra housing pieces back on here. They're not extra, you really need them.
Yes.
So the other components back on, let's say that. So the first thing I want to make sure to point out is we need to make sure we put this door back on because I'm not perfect and I've made this mistake. So do this.
Door first.
Door first. Because what I've done is I'm in such a hurry, I get the machine put all back together and I completely forget to put this door in because I have it set off to the side somewhere. And I go to turn the machine on, start using it. I'm like, oh crap, the door's not on.
I got a spare
So
part.
now I can't put the door on without removing the top again. So put the door on, and it just sits in these 2 pins with the 2 holes for the hinges here. And now that it's on, there you go.
Okay.
Simple thing.
Didn't forget the door this time.
Didn't forget it. All right, so now we're going to grab the top of the machine, the whole top.
The whole top.
And we're going to plug in our water sensor. Hopefully you didn't, push it down in there when you're installing the interior. And we're just going to push it back in that connector. It's got 3 holes that line up with 3 pins. They're usually on, well, I know they are facing this way. So just make sure your pinholes are facing towards you as you're putting it in, basically.
Okay.
So once you get it lined up, you can push it in.
Okay.
Just like that. And then we're going to feed this around. There's a couple of claws here. We'll call them claws. We just got to feed the wires around them if it doesn't want to be a pain. There we go. And this kind of helps hold the wire out of the way when you're putting the top back on. Doesn't really matter how it goes in there, just as long as it's
pull it
there.
out of the way. Okay.
So we're going to turn it like this. I'm going to hold on to the left side of it. And we're going to reattach our water line. Don't put it on the back one. Put it on the front one. This is where the water comes from your tank through your machine. This is your drain area, so your tank isn't supplying water to this.
Okay.
Excess water in the area will supply water to that.
Okay.
So if you hook your water line here and then not here, and you go put your machine back together, you're literally going to pour water into your machine.
We don't want that.
No, it's not fun. So just make sure you reconnect it to that front spot.
Got it.
And not that one.
Okay.
Only because I've seen it. So the only other thing we need to do before we start placing this top on is to add this wire back up through the opening. And also, if you knocked off this thing for any reason, hopefully you didn't. Most of the time they're stuck on there pretty good. Make sure to reinstall it back in there before you put the top on. Hopefully you remembered where the setting was if it did get knocked off.
Oh.
Because you got to make sure it's in the correct spot. Right now this is in the finest grind, only because I know that's the location of this white mark. So your smallest dot is like over here.
Okay.
It's a little, we have a video on how to align all that if you need to go back and do that, but hopefully that didn't happen.
Okay.
Again, that has happened to me, so that's what I always keep track of when I take things apart. I'm like, I always look to see where that's set before I go any further, so I knew where it was before taking it apart.
So you just fed that up through?
Yeah, I just fed it up through, and you can see it come up through the opening. Sometimes the wires are a little coiled up. You might have to fish around a little bit, but as long as you can get it up through here, I'm just holding the wire now as I position the upper housing, and then sometimes I'll let the lid close down on it.
Just kind of keep it in place.
It won't allow it to move around. And then this ribbon cable likes to get in the way also. So we're gonna just push that up as we start maneuvering the housing down. And most of the times the water tube, which you can't see, the one that we connected to the bottom, will pretty much go down and seat itself. There's been very rare occasions where it's gotten pinched on me, and I didn't know it until I started testing the machine out after I got it back together. Unfortunately, I had to take it back apart and figure out why is this not pulling water, and then reinstall it, and then finally it's pulling water again. I'm like, I must have pitched the water line, because you can't see it.
Right.
And when you take it apart, you still can't see that it was happening.
It's pinched, so yeah.
So the housing basically just drops into position as long as you have it in the right spot.
Okay.
Okay. So now that it's in there, we're going to fish this ribbon cable through this rectangular opening, just like that. And we're going to start putting some screws in. So we have the 5 screws, 3 on this side and 2 on this side, to put into this upper housing. You got 1 back here, and then 2 on each corner back here. These are unfortunately not magnetic, so it's a little bit more of a pain to get the screw lined up in there, especially when you can't see down in there. So once you get it in there, you just tighten that down, also making sure to stop when the screw stops. You can see I'm kind of holding the screw in my finger, forced against the screwdriver as I'm guiding it down there, in hopes that I don't have to redo that multiple times. And this one over here, which I'm going to try to do so you can still see, like that. Well, got lucky on that one. So we got 3 of the stainless steel screws in this water tank area, and now we can go to the other side, and we have 2 screws here, 1 back corner, 1 by the bypass doser lid. So we're going to be very careful.
You don't want to drop those in the grinder, right? I mean,
if they do drop in, it's more hassle to get them out, especially if your grinder's empty and it drops way down in there. Now you gotta get like something to fish it out with. On a very narrow area to pull it out from. So I just try my hardest to make sure that screw does not drop out in there, because it makes my life a little bit more of a pain. If it drops in there, it's not a worry. Just make sure you don't run the machine with the screw in there, of course. But now we have those 2 screws in. We can hook our sensor back up, and that's our sensor holder that we put off the side when we took this apart. You can slide that sensor into those 2 teeth right there. You can push it on, but it separates those and might break them. I usually slide it in until it hits this stopper right here, the very edge. And you just kind of feel it stop there, and then that's where you want the sensor. And we're going to fish the wires down in through here, hopefully in a manner where it's not pulling on the sensor or pushing on the sensor that much, because that'll move that sensor around, and you just kind of place it in place. And take our 1 flat-headed short screw.
The only one? The
only one. And put that in there. Again, just going until it stops, because you don't want to over-tighten it. Now that sensor's in position, the holder's there, so your machine should recognize it. If it doesn't, you can always pull that out and reposition, make sure you got it correct, because just putting it in sometimes throws it off. So now we have the housing on, we can start putting the front back together here. And we need this black piece, this weird structured black piece, and it's got these tabs on both sides that slide down into these square areas that have openings on the outside. Those tabs lock into those openings, so we're gonna just kind of fish those in there like that, and then just push it back like that.
Push it back. And you'll end up with
so those locked in, and then there's a few little teeth on the back side that kind of lock in at the back.
All
right. Now we're going to grab our control panel, making sure this one's got some fingerprints on it, sorry. But if you got any fingerprints on them, you're going to want to wipe them down.
Clean those off.
At some point before putting that front cover on, which we'll get to in a second. So if you got them there now, don't worry about them. Worry about them in a minute.
Okay.
So we're going to hook up this ribbon cable. And before I do that, I'm going to point out these two little arms sticking out. Mm-hmm. They go into these channels right here.
Those kind of U-shaped channels. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So we're gonna, once we connect our cable, we're gonna fish those into the U channels and drop them down in there and then push back on the screen area. That locks it into that black piece that we just put in.
Okay.
I need to pull it back out so I can put the cable on. So we'll put this back in like that. We'll put our ribbon cable on. I'm gonna lift that flap open. See the rectangular connector there. We're gonna feed that on. Make sure it's lined up before pressing it in. I can tell it's on there, so I'm gonna push it on.
Okay.
And we can let that flap go. And then feed these guys into the grooves and then push back.
Push back, a little click. Yeah.
So now our control panel is plugged in. We can take this doohickey.
Technical term.
The doohickey. This is the face plate, I guess is how it's called, I think. We're just going to line that up and push it. Well, that one didn't seat in all the way. Let's try that again. Make sure that's locked in. Okay. There we go. For some reason I didn't hit the right spot when I first did it the first time. But once you get in the right spot, all three of the buttons will pop through and these two tabs will lock in on the side like they're supposed to. Okay. On the inside of this thing. So once you get that slid in, we can add our two longer screws, the only ones in here that we took out that are about an inch and a quarter. The stainless steel also. We're going to thread those guys in until they stop. We're almost there.
Almost there.
And then we can take these two pieces. Now the trick, if you want, you can watch a video where I show how to bend these out a little bit with just adding a little pressure with pliers before installing this. It'll help hold that up in position if you have that dropping spout issue. But for time's sake, we're gonna not do that in this video. We're just gonna put these two guides on these two tracks. They go on the outside of the track, and we're going to slide it up in here, like that. We're going to take this, and we're going to slide it over once we have this up.
So you got to have that spout assembly kind of up a little bit.
Yeah, right? I mean, you just want to make sure it's in an area where you can slide this over, so now that when you slide this up and down, it stays in where it's supposed to. There's going to be two arms on either side of this thing that need to go into the slots on either side here and here. And as you can see, they have, when you get them in there, you just push it down just a hair. And it helps lock that in, and then you have your screw to put in to lock it in the rest of the way. Okay. So we're going to put that in, and that went in pretty quick, and it dropped down. We're going to take our screw and play operation, and carefully get it in there. Oh, I think I finally got it. I didn't get it. I can tell. Did I? No, I didn't. It's on an angle. Let me back that out real quick. I haven't done that in a while. Come on.
Went in at a bit of an angle, did it?
Yeah, I didn't hit the hole in the middle. I actually went off to the side accidentally.
Because I'm making you work from the side so that we can see what you're doing.
Normally I can just go straight in and get it right off the bat. Like that.
Like that? Okay.
So what happened is my screw probably went on an angle on my screwdriver as I was going in, and went off to the side of the screw hole.
You were quick not to force it there,
yeah.
Right? Okay.
And what it felt like it was threading in, and it did actually kind of thread in. It was just between two plastic areas.
Sure.
It just wouldn't have tightened down all the way, and it would have acted weird, and you could have seen, like I did, where it was on an angle.
Okay.
So just try to work it out of there and retry like I just did. All right, so now we got that in, we can start putting that part back on, this face cover for the screen. We got the button cover. It's got the slot on the bottom, which goes on the bottom. There's a little tab down here.
Okay.
So it can only go on one way. We're just going to set that in place because we're going to feed this around it. And this, make sure this rubber thing is seated in. It's holding the screen in the black frame underneath here. So just make sure that's in. And I'm going to turn this a little bit so I can see and you can see. We're going to feed this U-shaped area underneath the button and put this in on an angle. So once I get the rubber in there, I don't have to worry about the button falling off.
Okay.
Because we're kind of moving this back with the button on there. So we're just going to put it back like that. And if you look at the front, you can see the button's not lining up with the hole right now.
Right.
So we're just going to push down
until
it pops in there, and then push back on that.
And it snaps into place.
Yeah, there's tabs on both sides that lock into the openings back here. It's a really tight fit. So that's why you want to make sure that button is, I push down and let that button go through it before I locked it in.
Yeah.
So make sure you do that. And then we got 2 more screws. We got one here, and there's the other one.
You got a little concerned for a
I
moment
did.
there,
I was like,
didn't
I'm
you?
pretty sure I had them all here. And this guy here. And then we got the trim. Again, just have to line that up. I would say about 1/4 inch from this bracket here, and just kind of rest against the track that it sits on. And you can slide it forward just like that, and you're gonna pop these side rails back in. You heard them click. Same thing with this side. Start about there, slide it in, click the rail in. So now we have that all together. You should be able to use the machine. And you can put your accessories in. You got your tray. You got this brewer unit. And then you got your actual tray. And there you go.
There you go.
I just got to show you one quick thing over here.
This is on the, so that's the Anima Prestige.
This is the Prestige. So the Deluxe and the Anima don't have that carafe function.
They got a spout.
They have the arm.
Or the arm, yes. Yeah. I called it the wrong.
So as like I showed you on removal of the housing, we pulled this out and I showed you how to do that. So you could, once you got to that point to do so, now we put this all back together. You can do this. You can do this even after putting the faceplate on.
Okay, so this can be the last.
It can be the last part, or it can be shortly after you put this faceplate on.
Okay. Before
doing all this other stuff. At any point after you get this cover on, you can do this.
Okay.
So we just need to make sure our 2 O-rings are on the arm.
You want those on the arm, yes.
Yeah, and then we're going to slide this collar over. Okay. Let me grab my screwdriver so I have it over here. We're going to push this into that center opening. And we're going to wiggle it around as we're doing it so those O-rings kind of seat themselves in there. And then you're going to push that white collar at the same time. If it wants to be a pain, you can grab a tool.
Kind of help it along a little bit, get it through.
Yeah, it's being a problem. There we go. I think I got it. Are you not in all the way? No, you're in all the way. Okay. So at some point, once you get it in there just right, you can take your screw and go into that screw opening there and tighten it down. You'll see that this collar will pull it in and snug everything up. And now you can see that I can't pull that out.
Normal operation.
And that opening, I should have pointed out, as we're putting in, needs to be at the top.
Yes.
So that the thing can pivot left or right.
Right.
If you have it any other way, it's not going to pivot the way you want it to. Then we can take our cap, this longer tongue tab area has to be facing upwards. It goes up underneath here and locks in. So we're gonna slide this up. And what I just did is I pushed the arm down just a hair. Mm-hmm. Once I got there, I pushed it down so I can put that tab up underneath there. Mm-hmm. And then push on the bottom.
There we go.
And it snaps into place. Making sure to put that tongue up underneath.
Right.
So that is how you reinstall the top and the front of the machine. Again, the difference between the two is this and the arm. So that's the only difference. Everything else is the same on removal and attaching everything. So there, hopefully whatever had to be done is corrected and you'll be able to use your machine and you're good to go.
All right, Ted, thanks for taking us through that.
You're welcome.